Thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. I'm Jim Cardle. Well, the Texas legislative session for 2019 is in the books, and state legislators are spanning across their district and the state, sharing and talking about some of the things they accomplished, including significant and monumental school finance reform and property tax reform that hasn't been redone since 1979. State Rep Tan Parker is a former chairman of the House Republican Caucus. He's a leader in the House of Representatives, serving on the House State Affairs Committee and the Business and Industry Committee. He's been a key player in some pro-life issues this session, and we're pleased to be able to visit today to get an overview of what was accomplished with State Rep Tan Parker from House District 63. Well, State Representative Tan Parker from House District 63, appreciate you coming in and joining us today.
Jim, it's my privilege. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation.
I know you're on a tight schedule, want to get right into it. I've been talking to some of your peers. The big issue, of course, is the state budget. That is constitutionally the only thing you all are required to do. There's been a little discussion about it increasing maybe more than some folks would have liked. If you look to the Legislative Budget Board, though, it was down in the 2 to 3 to maybe 4% range. Give us, if you can, State Representative, a big overview, 30,000 feet. What did you think about the state budget this cycle?
Look, you nailed it a moment ago. That's the only thing that constitutionally we have to do during the 140-day period. Look, I think we addressed the priorities of Texas. We addressed the needs of Texas. We provided another $6.5 billion for public education, for example. Very, very important, I think, for us to do that. Mm-hmm. We provided another $5 billion, about $5.1 billion in property tax relief for the people of Texas. So you look at the key elements, if you will, of that budget. I think it was a very good and responsible conservative budget. And I think my colleagues obviously feel that way. That's why obviously the vast majority of us supported it as we ultimately passed it when we were in session just a couple weeks ago.
And the governor just signed the budget the other day. A lot of folks are taking notice that there was no line item vetoes, signal of maybe the fact that you've done some good work.
Well, I think we did. I think we worked very closely with the governor, frankly. The governor was very involved during the session on all aspects of policy. And I think the governor, obviously, by the fact that he did not take any other action other than signing into law, I think it really speaks for itself that he is comfortable with what we did, and we worked together collaboratively very well as a body during the session.
You mentioned not only the property tax, but education reform. Most property tax or budget analysts say that this hasn't been done since really the late 1970s or 1980, perhaps. You all essentially tore it down and put it back together. How'd you do it? Tell us some of the details.
No, you're exactly right. Look, I mean, when it came to public education, I want to give Dan Uberty great credit as the chairman of the committee. Did a wonderful job leading it. That public education committee had the heavy lifting to put this together. They worked together beautifully in a bipartisan way to come together to find, common sense solutions for the kids in Texas. We had to address the equity. We had to address recapture. We did a great job, I think, in reducing the recapture level in Texas. Okay. We also, we increased, as I said earlier, the amount of state funding of public education. So those were all key hallmarks that made this, I think, very successful in getting it done. And I'm hopeful that we'll have a really great future now for public education in Texas. It's so important. At the end of the day, I think that our public education system in Texas made this nation great, and I think it's important that we continue to strengthen it and to invest in it, and we're doing that.
Folks, I want to thank you again for joining us for this edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. We're talking with State Rep Tan Parker from District 63. Tan, you're on the State Affairs Committee, the Business and Industry Committee. How about, I know particularly for a lot of folks in the Metroplex area where you are in Flower Mound, transportation's an issue. Were there some needs addressed there, I imagine, for future growth? And we got problems in Texas in that regard.
No, look, there's no question we do. That's obviously when I talk about the things we need to invest in. We need to continue to invest in our infrastructure. And infrastructure for me means obviously our transit system. It's also about education. It's also about K through 12. It's about higher ed. It's about workforce development. All of those are critically important items in my assessment for us to invest in. And so with regard to transportation in particular, yes, we continue to fund transportation projects. We continue to put more money into the budget. And so I think we made good decisions in that regard. But the focus clearly of the session was about a good budget, about fixing school finance, obviously in a meaningful way, multi-generational impact, as you just talked about a moment ago, and also specifically provide real relief for the people of Texas from a property tax perspective. So the fact that we provided $5.1 billion in relief, along with the long-term reform that will slow the growth going forward, we think is exceptionally good policy and things that will make a difference for real people that are working hard to pay the bills and will continue to keep the economic miracle in Texas alive and well. Let me just say one thing.
Sure.
I really shouldn't call it a miracle. The reality is it's been deliberate policy that's given us the great economic situation we have today.
A lot of folks have referred to it as the miracle. You raise a good point there. How about in terms, if I can pivot a little bit to some of the social, a lot of focus on the Chick-fil-A bill for the San Antonio airport. Texas has been a leader in the pro-life issues in previous sessions. Talk about some of the things you might have worked on or you saw get accomplished in that regard.
Absolutely. Well, as a member of State Affairs, a lot of those bills come our way. So the Chick-fil-A bill came through the committee. Was obviously proud to support that. It was important that we passed it on the House floor. We got it done ultimately, obviously during the session. Took a little longer than we thought we would, but we got it done. And I think that was an important thing. Protecting religious liberty in Texas is a critical principle for me, and I think all of my Republican colleagues. And so I was very pleased that we were able to deliver on that. When it comes to the pro-life issue, no issue specifically is more important to me than protecting life and creating a culture of life from conception to natural death. But it's also so important beyond the pro-life measures that we focus on how we take care of people once they're here.
Okay.
And I think one of the great victories, if you will, of the session that people don't talk about is what we did to help these medically fragile, precious babies.
Okay.
We have thousands of kids in the state system that are getting support from, for health care, and that medically fragile system just has not been working optimally. Too many of these families were having difficulty and challenges going from one specialist to another, and all kinds of other complexities and waiting and so forth. And I'm sorry, these are babies that don't have the flexibility to wait 2 weeks to see a specialist. Every day for them is a critical situation. Their living rooms in many cases look like an emergency room in terms of what's required to keep these kids alive and functioning. So in the end of the day, these are families that make an incredible choice when they select life.
Okay.
We need to embrace them, we need to support them, because it's ultimately a pro-life measure. And so I really think what we do with medically fragile children is really, frankly, from my perspective, perhaps the biggest pro-life victory of the session.
And this was something you worked on, correct?
Absolutely. I worked very closely with Matt Krause in the House, Jeff Leach, and also Senator Perry, really in putting this thing together. So we put a lot of heart and soul into it to make sure we did something meaningful to really help these precious families and these kids that are so wonderful and suffering.
Okay, one final question for State Rep Tan Parker from House District 63 in Flower Mound, the DFW area. It's been interesting talking about the quote-unquote big three, Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, Speaker Bonin, and it seems as if you all had a session where things actually worked, and folks across the state really don't know how to take it. Certainly, some of the naysayers here in Austin have been struggling, according to some, to find a way to describe it. What was it like for you as a member on the floor, and what's your overall perspective?
Look, there's no question from a member's perspective that it's terrific when the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker are on the same page and they're working well together, having their regular weekly meetings and so forth. That has kind of created a great tempo and a great pace for us to have a successful session that we did. So I really take my hat off to all three for working collaboratively to make certain we had a great session and focus on what we're here to do, which is to serve the 30 million people that we're blessed to represent. So I'm delighted with the way that all worked out. I'm delighted with, I was blessed to personally pass some other bills, aside from ones dealing with medically fragile kids. My bill for advancing adult stem cell is really the first of its kind in the nation. We perfected that language that I passed in 2017. A lot of incredible things there, I think, that will save a lot of lives. It'll make a real difference. My prayer is for not just tens of thousands of Texans, but hopefully hundreds of thousands of Americans ultimately. And the same thing is another bill that I'm very passionate about that I dealt with cancer clinical trials and allowing people that were participating in cancer clinical trials to get some financial assistance. When you're incredibly sick and you're battling for your life, that family doesn't need additional strain if they can't financially make it to be able to cover their expenses of a hotel room and participating in a trial that can save their life. And that particular bill, I think, will make a real difference in the lives of Texans that are struggling with that horrible condition, and give them a chance to focus on the recovery and focus on their family and not worried about how they're paying the hotel bill when they have to leave home to get something that can ultimately save their life. So I'm very thankful to my colleagues for supporting me in my leadership on adult stem cell therapy, cancer clinical trials, and these other areas where we're continuing to innovate to really serve Texans.
Well, speaking of saving things, we're going to put a plug in the jug and save some time. I know you got a busy schedule to be going and adhering to. So State Rep Tan Parker from House District 63, appreciate you coming in and joining us.
Well, Jim, thank you. It's always a privilege to be here, and thank you for all you've done over the years for our conservative movement with the Insider. We're so grateful to you and all you do for Texas. So
Well, that
bless
goes,
you.
That goes both ways.
Thank
Folks,
you.
we appreciate you joining us for this quick visit with State Rep Tan Parker, a member of the Business and Industry and State Affairs Committee, former chairman of the House Republican Caucus, I should mention too, in the leadership position. Remember, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.